Hi, and welcome to episode 46 of the Raw Leadership Podcast with me, Steve Barker. How are you? It's been an absolute age since I did a recording on the Raw Leadership Podcast, but here I am. I'm back again, and now I'm videoing them. So if you want to watch the video rather than listen to just a podcast, go and find it on all of my platforms. So today I wanted to unpack the law of the lid. Now, this comes from my mentor, John Maxwell. He is often talking about the law of the lid, and I think it's really rather pertinent right now. So, the law of the lid is described as the level of your leadership will determine the level of your success. So, we can never outperform the lid of our leadership. So, let's score our leadership out of 10. So, perhaps you are a 7 out of 10 with regards to leadership. That's the lid that's on your leadership, which means you're never going to get above a 7 out of 10 in the success within the area of your leadership. Now, that might be within business, that might be within your family, that might be within your community, or even if we look at this of leading ourselves, that could be in the way that you lead yourself. So if you are only ever a 7 out of 10 in your leadership skills, then your success level is going to reflect that. You're going to keep bashing up against the top of the lid, and you'll never get any further. Now, the good news is that leadership is a skill and leadership can be learnt. Now, I often talk about this, and you will have heard this in previous podcasts. It's better to be green and growing than it is to be ripe and rotting. Nobody likes to be around anyone who is ripe and rotting. Now, what do I mean by ripe and rotting? Well, what I mean by ripe and rotting is the know-it-alls, the I know best. I don't need to learn anything else. I know all about this. Those sort of people, I'm sure you've come across them in your own life, and I'm sure you don't want to be around them. Whereas those that are green and growing, those who are constantly learning, constantly developing, constantly upskilling, they have something fresh to share. They also know that they don't know it all. So when we start to look at this, then we can say, okay, well, if I'm a 7 out of 10 at leadership at the moment, and that's as far as I can go with regards to success, either in my business, in my team, in my family, or even in my own life. But I know that leadership can be taught and leadership is a skill that can be developed. There's no reason why I can't go to an 8 out of 10, a 9 out of 10. I'd never say we get to a 10 out of 10 because, again, you start to become ripe and rotting. However, there are people out there who think that they know it all. Now, in my own business as a leadership coach, I've come across plenty of people who run teams, run businesses, and they actually turn around to me and say, Steve, there's nothing wrong with my leadership. I'm perfectly fine. It's the rest of my team. I'm sure you've heard that before. And what I do is I go into those teams and I start to train the teams and I start to see that the problem actually is with the business owner, the executive level of the business. Now, the hardest thing is to get those people to recognize that they also need to continue to grow, learn, and develop. Now, one of the strategies that I use is to train the team and train the leadership team. But then what happens is the leadership team and the team start to talk a different language to the execs and the business owners. And the execs and the business owners then tend to be a bit behind the drag curve, feel disconnected from the business. And I suggest to them, and I use my language very, very carefully because language, again, is a really important element of leadership. And I say to them, hey, look, when you're at the level that you're at as executives and business owners, yes, you know a lot about leadership. How about I give you some executive leadership training, which will bring you up to speed with what I'm doing with the team? Now, it's stuff that you probably already know, but it gets you all talking on the same language. And generally, what they then say is, yeah, okay, that's a good idea, Steve. Let's go with that. Because what actually happens is if we start to think that we can only achieve so much, the law of the lid, and we keep banging our head against the lid, then what actually happens is that becomes a learned behavior. Now, a learned behavior then becomes a belief system. Now, these are things that I talk about in my leadership coaching. What is a belief system? And very often we have beliefs that hold us back. Now, let me share with you the story of a flea. You're probably thinking, oh my God, where's he going now? Okay, so they did a scientific experiment with a flea. Now, fleas can jump up to 200 times their own height. They can jump massive distances. And what they did was they put a flea into a jar and they put a lid on top of the jar. And the flea started to jump, trying to get out of the jar. But the flea kept banging its head on the top of the jar, on the lid. And after a period of time, that flea then learnt to only jump to the height of the jar or just a little bit less so it didn't keep banging its head. Then they took the lid off the jar, they took the flea out of the jar, and they observed its behavior. The flea never jumped any higher than when it was in the jar. It had already learnt that it couldn't jump any further because it kept banging its head. That didn't make it feel very good. So it learnt to limit its jump. Now, the reason why I've shared that story with you is because as human beings, we fall into this trap a lot. Now, I'm a human behavioral expert. I've been studying human behavior for many, many years now, and we all follow patterns of human behavior. Now, one of the patterns that we have is limiting beliefs, believing that we can't do something, believing that it's too difficult, believing that we can't improve, believing that we know everything. Now let that one settle in. What area of your life? Now, I know you're going to be listening to this and you'll be going, oh, Steve, I don't know everything. I'm quite happy. Yet we say that. Yet when it comes to our own professional or personal development, we dismiss it. We say, don't need that. What a load of rubbish. But if we go back to the law of the lid with regards to leadership, and the level of our leadership will determine the level of our success, this is why we start to see people plateauing in their lives, in their relationships, in their business, in their workplace, and in their community. Because they've kind of got used to that kind of level that the flea had jumping into the lid. And they then start to have this learnt behavior that that's the best. They never, ever look beyond. And perhaps if they did look beyond, they would go, that's unobtainable. That's unachievable. I don't have the resources, the time, the money, the skills to be able to reach that. This is what is often referred to as the glass ceiling. The glass ceiling is where we kind of reach a level and we believe we can't go any higher, yet we see everybody else or other people around us going higher and higher. We see people breaking through, and we've got this kind of invisible glass ceiling that stops us from going any further. Now, what has all this got to do with leadership? Well, it's got everything to do with leadership because, as John says, everything rises and falls on leadership. Now, I've taken that and I've added one word. Everything rises and falls on your leadership, whether that's your leadership of yourself, your leadership of your family, your leadership of your community, your leadership of your team, or your leadership of your business. Everything rises and falls on your leadership. So if we believe we don't need developing, but everybody else does, everybody below us needs developing, but we don't need developing, then we're going to put a cap on our success, which is perfectly fine if you're happy at that level. But if you're ambitious and you're driven and you want the very best that you can have in your life, then you need to continue to develop, learn and grow. Green and growing, ripe and rotting. These are the two differences. And it all comes down to mindset. Now, one of the things that I've learned after leaving the Air Force, because if you don't know, I was in the military for 26 years, was that Nobody's going to come and give me any extra training. In the military, they used to train us all the time. We used to get sent away on training courses all the time. I never realized just how fortunate I was until I left that environment. And now I have to source and pay for and find the time for my own personal and professional development. But I've found that it is critical for me to keep growing, for me to keep extending my skill set around leadership, around life, around money, around relationships. And what I find is that the more that I invest in myself, the return of investment is tenfold. So in actual fact, it's only fivefold because I did some research on it the other day. And the Australian Institute of Management have recognized that for every $1 that you spend on professional or personal development, you get a return on average of $5 worth of value. Now, that's not money wise, but I suppose if I was to take my leadership trainings, my coaching trainings, and everything else that I've trained in over the last 7 years, I would say that I've increased that from fivefold to tenfold easily. And this is it. If you invest in your professional development, if you invest in your skill set, then you become more valuable. This goes for your team as well. If you're a leader, if you're a business owner and you're listening to this and you're wondering why your business is plateauing, it's because of your leadership skills, perhaps maybe even that of your team, because people will only rise to the level of their skill set. In this case, I'm talking about leadership. We come back to the law of the lid. If you're a 7 out of 10, then your success rate is probably going to be a 6 out of 10, maybe a 6.5, but it's never going to get above a 7. But if you invest into that development, if you invest into that growth, if you invest into the people around you who are part of your team, you'll see yourself go from a 7 to an 8 to a 9, 9.5, 9.6, 9.7. Yeah, I never say that I'm a 10 out of 10 of anything because I always think that there's plenty more to learn. In actual fact, one of the things that I often say is that I believe when I die, I'll probably know about 20% of everything that I need to know, and I wish I'd tried harder to learn more. And there's a wealth of knowledge out there. You just have to tap into it. So I hope this is landing with you. I've explained the law of the lid. The law of the lid states that the level of our leadership skills will determine the level of our success. And if you find yourself plateauing, or you find that your business or your team are plateauing, or even your team members are plateauing, that is because they've hit the law of the lid. Okay. Now, we as leaders, we're responsible for the growth and development of others around us. This is why I'm sharing this through this podcast, because if I just land with one person and they go, oh, yeah, I'm plateauing. I've hit the law of the lid. I'm a 7 out of 10, or I'm a 6 out of 10, or whatever you are scoring yourself out of a 10. And they go, do you know what? He's right. This is a skill. I can get better at it. I can learn it. I can go and find someone who can help me, who can mentor me, who can guide me, who can coach me in that area, somebody that I like, know, and trust. Then I'm going to be able to go to the next level. I'm going to be able to level up like in Donkey Kong. If I can just connect with one person and share that message, then myself as a leader, I'm doing the thing that I should be doing, which is helping other people grow and develop by adding value, by sharing something that I know with them for free. I don't get paid for this podcast. It doesn't get recorded. Well, it does get recorded, but it doesn't have any adverts in the middle of it. There's no financial gain for me. But one of the things I feel deep down in my soul is that I need to share what I know with other people. And I do this through my coaching. I do this through my trainings. I do this through my programs. I also do it through elements on social media and via podcasts like these. So look, I hope this has resonated with you. I hope that this is making sense. And if it is, I wish you all the best on your growth and development journey. If I can help you in any way, please give me a call. This is what I'm here for. But there's plenty of sources out there. It doesn't have to be me. I'm not saying you need to come and work with me. What I'm saying is there is plenty of resources out there for you to be able to raise the lid on your skill set so that you can then raise the lid on your success levels. Because remember, we only get paid for the value that we bring, the value that we can add to other people, the value that we can add to a business. And remember this as well. Everything rises and falls on your leadership. So look, I hope you've enjoyed this. Wherever you are in the world, whatever you're up to, I will speak to you again very, very soon. Take care. It's been lovely to chat with you. Toodaloo.